One thing that I've been thinking about recently as I was contemplating doing the second season of the All Around Adventure podcast is how I want to go about actually doing it. Now, some of you might remember some announcements that I released a couple weeks back where I kind of talked about what I was going to be doing with the show moving forward. And I've decided that I'm going to be speaking a little bit more from the heart when I do these solo episodes like I'm doing right now. And a lot of this came from feedback that I received from some of my listeners in the past, and then also just personally what I think I would rather do it or what I think I would enjoy doing more. And I was doing the blog readings series for a while where I was just reading my blog posts or reading other bloggers' posts and try saying that 5 times fast. But I decided I'm going to change it up and I'm actually going to speak just a little bit more from the heart. Just kind of think of travel moments that I've had in the past and just see if I can extract some life lessons and some value for you all today. So that's what I'm going to be doing. And this new series that I'm going to be launching, or this pilot episode of, is called Travel Reflections. And it's pretty much exactly how it sounds, where I'm just going to be reflecting on some of my own travel experiences and then just seeing what I could take from them that hopefully will add some value to you all, some life lessons. Typically, there'll be things or moments in my own travels that I've been able to take and implement into my own life. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this series, which, by the way, if you all are new here, this is the All Around Adventure podcast, the show where you hear amazing tales from afar and get the all-important life lessons that go along with them. Of course, you've already heard that in my fancy new intro. Got some good feedback about that intro, so I think it came out really good. And so I'm quite excited about that. I might be reeling on that a little bit here as we go. So with this solo episode of Travel Reflections, I'm going to go back a little bit and talk about some of my Peace Corps experiences that I've had. And reflecting on Peace Corps more and more is something that's been kind of happening with me lately because I recently was interviewed for another podcast with my friend Dr. Paul Harrison. He is the host of the Profane Humanities podcast. I joined him recently and told him a little bit about my time in Peace Corps. And one of the questions that he asked me was what a typical day was like for me living in a rural village in West Africa, which, by the way, I lived in the Gambia, which is a very small country in West Africa. It's completely surrounded by Senegal. It's actually the smallest the smallest country on the entire African continent. So it's just a tiny little strip of land coming in off the Atlantic. And so he asked me what a typical day was like. And so therefore I figured this would be a good opportunity to actually share a little bit about what my days were like there in the Gambia, but more specifically, what my mornings were like. You know, you've probably heard many times from other influential people out there, self-development people, just how important having a good morning routine actually is. And I never really thought about this very much before myself, until I was in the Gambia, and then I had come to find out that just having a good solid morning routine was absolutely critical for maintaining not only my mental health, but also my physical health just as well too. Because living in a developing country like the Gambia, it's no small feat, I'll say, especially for someone who grew up, in a first world country like the United States, where, I was so used to having all these amenities, running water, easy access to food, plenty of calories and technology up the wazoo. So moving to the Gambia, where a lot of that stuff wasn't quite readily available to me, and I had to work for a lot of things, like I had to collect water every single day, and oftentimes you didn't get the largest variety when it came to food. So it was a bit of an adjustment. Not to mention there were a lot of uncomfortable things about that. With it just being really, really hot for starters. It was about 107 degrees Fahrenheit pretty much just about every single day. During the summer months, you're going to get up to about 100% humidity, so it was pretty hot. And try getting infected with an intestinal parasite like Giardia and running a fever when it's that hot. And you don't get to go step into air conditioner anywhere because I didn't have electricity. So trying to fight a fever when it's that hot out, it was awful. Not to mention this parasite just riled in my intestines, and I'm curled up on a ball on the floor. And then, so that was some of the physical discomforts. But then there was also the feelings of isolation. I'm the only American in this village. If I wanted to see other Americans, I typically would have to get on my bike and ride to another village. Hopefully the volunteer that I was going there to see would be home. And if I wanted to call home, it cost about $20 to talk to someone for about 30 minutes on my little phone that I was issued while I was out there. So a lot of challenges, to say the least. So I had come to find that if I had a solid morning routine, then, it would start my days off on a very good note, and it would help make things a little bit more bearable, I suppose. So in this edition of Travel Reflections, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what my morning routine was like in the Gambia and what I did there and how it's been applicable to my morning routine now that I've been back stateside for a while and I'm working full-time as an archaeologist, while of course trying to do this podcasting thing on the side. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I got three things that were part of my morning routine, and I'm going to share them with you all and as to how I did these particular things in my routine when I was a Peace Corps volunteer, and to how I do them now. I mean, even though they're similar, there's some slight variances there, and which I'll get into. And I also have a bonus one for you all at the end of this, so stand by for the bonus at the end. All right, so the first one that I'll talk about is drinking water. Now, this is a pretty big one, of course, especially from a physical standpoint, being in the Gambia. I know it's going to get really hot during the day. It was a little bit cool in the morning, but I knew it was going to get really hot, so I make sure I drank water right away, get myself hydrated. And so that way, by the time the temperatures start rising, I was well hydrated and I could bear the heat just a little bit better. And of course, that really has not changed at all, hardly, now that I've been moved back stateside. Drinking water is literally the first thing I do. As a matter of fact, I have this here. Got this trusty little clean canteen. I fill this up with water at the end of the night. I set it on my nightstand, and the moment my feet touch the ground, or touch the floor rather, not really the ground, as soon as my feet hit the floor, I grab this thing off the nightstand and I drink the entire thing. It's 1 liter, and that's what helps get me started throughout the day, because when you wake up in the morning, you're actually dehydrated. You've been in this fasted state for hopefully 8 hours if you're getting the right amount of sleep, and you lose a lot of fluids just by breathing throughout the night. So when you wake up in the morning, you feel a little bit groggy sometimes, and then, a lot of times some people would just want to go straight for the coffee maker, which, coffee's fine and to have in the morning, but that grogginess feeling is not because you have you're missing out on caffeine. It's because you're dehydrated. So that's why I would say drink water first, and then you can go to your coffee maker or brew your tea or whatever else. But definitely start with water. Water's life, after all. So basically, that's one thing that's been pretty consistent with what I was doing in the Gambia to what I do now. And it's a surefire way to make sure that I'm starting the day off on a good note, and a good healthy note at that just as well. And so that's number 1, drinking water. Number 2 is movement. And now these next 2 points actually don't necessarily have to be done in any particular order. I would suggest start with water, but these next 2 points can be done interchangeably. It's kind of up to you. But the next one I'll talk about is movement. Getting the blood flowing, getting the circulation going, and then also just, kind of get maybe a little bit of an endorphin release before you go about your day. It's a good way to start on a good positive note, especially if you have the means to, if you're doing some sort of training program, maybe like a weightlifting program or a gym program or Peloton or, whatever the case may be. If you do it first thing in the morning, it's one less thing that you have to worry about in the afternoon. And it's a good way to start the day on a good note. I mean, I just noticed there is a night and day difference between how I feel physically when I get a workout in the morning before I go to work versus when I try to save my workout until after work. I feel like if I wait to hold it off after the work, I tend to be a little bit more tired, or I start thinking about all these things I need to get done in the afternoon. So a lot of times the workouts just won't happen. Or if I end up doing them, they're at a little bit of a half-assed form as to what I was really hoping to actually do. So doing them in the morning, you get them done, you get them out of the way, and then basically the rest of the day you can just focus on, work or whatever else you feel like you need to get done during the day. And when I was in Gambia, the movement that I would typically do is shadow boxing. Like, I didn't really have a lot of fancy equipment or anything like that. I just lived in a square hut that was probably about the size of the average American kitchen, and not really a whole lot of space. And there certainly wasn't a gym in my village or anything like that. So I would shadow box, or I would do some calisthenics, just anything, to get myself moving to start my day off on that note, and just, getting the metabolism fired up and things like that though too. So now what I typically do for movement in my mornings here is, now that I actually do have access to the gym, I will try to get my workout in first thing in the morning. Or if there's days where I'm taking rest days, I don't always typically just sit around and do nothing on rest days. I may get up and go for a walk, or, maybe I will just do some shadow boxing. Right now you can see I'm in a hotel. I'll do some shadow boxing here in the hotel room, maybe do some calisthenics. But a big thing that's become part of my practice as of late is doing yoga. I train in the gym about 3 times a week, lifting heavy weights. And if I find that I'm neglecting the flexibility and the mobility aspect of my physical practice, I can definitely take notice. I'm tense, I'm stiff. It takes a lot longer for me to recover from my workout. So yoga has become a pretty big part of my practice. I do about 30 minutes every day now. And like I mentioned, I try to get that in first thing in the morning to loosen up, start the day on a good positive note, which carries well through my energy levels as I go about into the day. So second tip to include in your morning that I would recommend is movement of some kind. And it can be any kind. I mean, dance around your house for all I care, or something, whatever it is, just get the body moving. We're humans after all. We are designed, we are built to move. We're not built for stagnation, like sitting in a chair all day. I mean, we're just not. So yes, to get yourself moving and get the blood flowing. So that's number 2, movement. The third thing that I'll talk about, and this is a pretty broad term, and again, as I mentioned earlier, you can do this before movement if you want, or as I'll also suggest, they could be done at the same time, and I'll get to that in a moment. But the third thing that I'll recommend is mindfulness practice. For me in the Gambia, my mindfulness practice was listening to music, because Gambians are very, very social people. And my family's compound where I lived in the village was right next to the village central market. So you'd hear the villagers and the different merchants out there setting up their stalls, talking to each other, and they're very vocal, very loud, and so I would wake up and it would just be noisy in my village, and sometimes now I'll admit it got irritating at times because I wanted to sleep, and being back stateside, growing up in a rural area myself, it was always usually really quiet, and I like starting my mornings on a nice quiet note. But living there in my village, that was in Gambia, that was not really a luxury that I was afforded. So in order to kind of just make sure I started my day off right mentally, I would just listen to music. I had one of those like iPod Nanos, which unfortunately broke like later on in my service. But I would just put in some music. Sometimes my music varied. I like a lot of 80s rock. Def Leppard's one of my favorite bands. I like Guns N' Roses, AC/DC, those 80s bands. I'm also a little bit of a metal fan too. Back then, like Five Finger Death Punch was one of my favorite bands, and I would listen to them regularly. And right now, I'd say probably my favorite band in the metal genre is In Flames. And I also like Bullet for My Valentine, So, so music was a big thing for me, but it's a little bit different now that I'm stateside. I take mindfulness practice. I don't know if I'd say more seriously is the right word, but I have it dialed in a little bit more. And I actually do meditations. And I will usually only meditate for maybe about like up to 10 minutes at a time. Don't really do it for like very long. One of the ways I've been doing it is I remember my friend Chris Albert with Warrior Soul. He recommended Sam Harris's Waking Up app, and I gave that a try, and that's been pretty helpful for me, and especially with learning like some of the different techniques with breathing. I've also tried box breathing, which I heard Mark Divine from Seal Fit talked about. It's where you inhale for 4 seconds, hold that breath for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, and then hold at the end of the exhale for another 4 seconds, and then you repeat the process, kind of like a box. And so that's something that I've been doing a little bit more in depth as well, is actually implementing meditations. And sometimes, you can combine like the breathing with practices. I combine it with yoga. Sometimes I'll do that both at the same time, yoga, breathing, mindfulness practice, all at once. Or like if I wanted to go back to using the music example for mindfulness, I could like shadow box to In Flames or something, something like that. So, and then for you, it might be something entirely different. Maybe that could just be putting on like your favorite dance song, and then you just dance around your kitchen as you're preparing breakfast or something. So, but again, see now what works for me, may or may not be something that you might be interested in. You might be interested in doing something else, which I probably should have caveated with that at the very beginning of this episode, that this is what I do. This is what's worked for me. I definitely recommend you incorporate these practices into your morning, but obviously the variations that you choose is going to be entirely up to you. It's whatever works for you. These are just more or less a couple of ideas. So just recapping on those three. So again, water. I drink a liter every single morning. That really helps out quite a bit. I move. Sometimes it's going straight to the gym to get in my planned workout for the day, or I might go for a walk, or I'll do some shadow boxing. And then I'll also incorporate mindfulness practice, meditation, listening to music. And sometimes, I'll try to just stimulate my brain by listening to an insightful podcast, whatever that might be. And of course, maybe this is actually part of your morning routine right now. Maybe you are listening to this episode of the All Around Adventure podcast as you are going about starting your morning, which I greatly appreciate, by the way. So thank you very much. So water, mindfulness, movement, 3 things that I think should be part of anyone's morning routine to start the day off on a positive note. Now, but I got a bonus for you. And actually, this bonus is going to be something not to do first thing in the morning. And that is check social media. Your morning time is your time. Do not forfeit your morning time by scrolling through someone else's life on social media. That's not the time to, that's your time, as I mentioned. So it's your time to do something for yourself before you got to go out there and face the world and start your day on a positive note. Okay. So don't forfeit that time by scrolling through someone else's life on social media. Not to mention that social media, let's face it, it's gotten, pretty negative as of late. So it's probably not the best way to start the day with just a lot of negativity, because that's going to just carry with you for the rest of the day. So try to focus on something a little bit more positive and focus on yourself. Hence why I suggested mindfulness practice and also movement. Good ways just to start the day off right, and that'll set you up perfectly to face the challenges that you face throughout the day. So social media, avoid it first thing in the morning. Save it for later. So, all right, everyone, that's really all I have to talk about for now. I really hope you enjoyed this very first episode of Travel Reflections. I've been conjuring up some other ideas. I think I got some great stuff in the pipeline for you all as I continue on with this series. I just want to thank you very much for tuning in today. If you did like if I can speak right now, if you did like what you heard today, make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. This is a weekly podcast. We got a brand new episode coming to you every single Monday. Also, why not head over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star rating and review. That'll get us trending higher so that way more people can find this podcast and get some value from it as well. Also, if you're just listening to this podcast on whatever directory you're listening to, the video version is on Facebook. If you want to see me, if you want to see what I look like, I suppose. I'm a pretty handsome dude. Other people's words, not mine. So yeah, you can find the podcast on YouTube, and all my guest episodes will also be uploaded to YouTube as well. Also, we got another free resource available to you here at All Around Adventure, and that is our private Facebook group called Travel Titans. It's a group that is created for travelers to share their stories, their tips and advice, as well as their inspiration pertaining to both travel and self-development. And if you think that's something that you'd like to be a part of, head over to facebook.com/groups/Travel Titans, and we look forward to seeing you there. And I think that's all I have to say for now. And I just thank you all again for being here today. It really means a lot to have your support. I know there's a lot of amazing podcasts out there that you could be listening to, but the fact that you chose to download and listen to this one, I greatly appreciate it, and I certainly don't take it for granted. All right, everyone, thanks so much again for tuning in. I don't know how many times I'm going to say thank you here. I'm doing this off the cuff, people, so yeah, I'm going to screw this up from time to time. But anyway, I'll be back at you all next week with another fantastic again, if I could speak. Get me out of here, dang. With another fantastic guest episode. But until then, I'm Josh Guerrero saying be safe, happy travels, and always move forward.